Love is a quiet contract. You don't announce it, you just keep showing up, even when nobody's clapping. And when somebody breaks that contract, it's rarely with a fist. Sometimes it's with a pen, a kitchen chair scraped back, and a signature you only find out about after the fact. What made me dangerous wasn't rage. It was documentation. Late February in Muskogee has a way of making everything look the same color. The trees aren't dead, but they're not trying yet. The sky is low. The mornings feel like they've been used already. I'm Dale Merritt. I'm 52. I drive Medicaid transport. 3 mornings a week, I pick up dialysis patients and get them where they need to go, and I do it the same way every time because routine is the only thing in this world that doesn't ask you to pretend. Before I leave my house, I rinse my coffee mug 3 times before I fill it. Hot water, cold water, hot again. No soap. I don't know when I started doing it. I just know that if I don't, my day feels crooked. That detail matters later. On the morning this started turning, the dashboard clock said 7:42 a.m. Wednesday, February 26th. I remember it because the numbers looked too sharp against the dim light, and because my phone was buzzing with the first pickup. Address as I rolled onto Honor Heights Drive. I wish I could tell you I saw it coming. Dialysis mornings have their own rhythm. You don't speed. You don't slam brakes. You don't talk too loud. People are already tired before you touch the key. My first rider that day was Mr. Gentry, a man who always wore a camouflage cap and always apologized for needing help even though none of it was his fault. I got him buckled, kept my eyes on the road, and drove like the world was fragile. Most days, after I drop the last rider off, I swing by Peavy's Family Diner for a cup of coffee. I don't need an eggs I barely eat. I sit in the same booth by the window, the one with the little wobble in the table leg. The server, Mel, doesn't ask what I want anymore. She just brings it and sets down 2 packets of pepper, like it's a small kindness she's been doing so long it doesn't feel like effort. It's funny what keeps you alive. Sometimes it's not love. Sometimes it's a diner routine and a cup of coffee that tastes like a spoon. That morning, though, I didn't go to Peavy's. I turned toward my mom's house instead. Loretta lives 10 minutes from me, in a small place that's been paid off longer than I've been driving. There's an old bird feeder out back that she still fills even though she forgets she filled it. I keep the driveway clear. I fix the loose hinge on the gate. I do the quiet stuff. Because she used to do it for me. My mom is 79 and she's in early-stage dementia, the kind that hides in plain sight until it doesn't. Some days she's sharp. Some days she calls me by my dad's name and looks embarrassed after, like she stepped on a crack and it startled her. When I walk in, if she's having a good day, she folds my jacket over the back of the chair like she's been waiting by the door. It's not grand. It's not a speech. It's just her hands doing something familiar. The way they used to fold towels. The way they used to fix my collar before school. She also saves a crossword puzzle for me. She can't finish them anymore. She'll circle clues, write half a word, and then stop like the answer walked out of the room. But she keeps one on the table anyway. When I sit down, she pushes it toward me like she's offering me a piece of who she used to be. That's my mom. There were red flags around my brother-in-law, Kenny Fitch, before that morning. I saw them. I filed them away in the part of my brain that excuses things because it's easier than dealing with them. Red flag number 1 was money talk. Kenny talked about money the way some men talk about weather. Always happening, always shifting, always a reason you couldn't count on tomorrow. He'd say things like, "You don't want the state getting involved," and "assets need protecting," like he was doing everybody a favor just by bringing it up. I told myself he was just practical. Red flag number 2 was his comfort with paperwork that wasn't his. I'd come over and see my mom's mail already opened and stacked neat, like somebody had sorted her life into little piles and labeled them. Kenny would be sitting there, calm as a banker, flipping through envelopes. She didn't even look up. Mom would just keep stirring her tea or tracing the edge of the table with her finger, like it was normal for someone else to handle the parts of her life. She didn't understand anymore. I told myself Kenny was helping. Red flag number 3 was how quick he was to make decisions for her. Not ask, decide. He'd schedule appointments and then tell me afterward. He'd buy groceries and tell her what she liked. He'd say, "Loretta doesn't need to worry about that," and he'd smile while he said it. I told myself he was stepping up. And to be fair, Kenny had one thing about him that made it hard to keep him at arm's length. He was genuinely good with my kids. My daughter, Emma, is 18 now. But when she was little, she used to sit cross-legged on the living room floor and let Kenny do dumb magic tricks with a deck of cards. My son Wyatt is 15 and quiet, and Kenny somehow knew how to pull a laugh out of him without pushing. He'd show up for ball games. He'd remember birthdays. He'd be patient in that way that makes you think, maybe he's not all bad. That's the kind of man who can move through a family without anybody stopping him. My wife passed 5 years ago. Cancer. The kind that does not negotiate. I don't talk about that much. Not because I'm tough. Because some things, when you say them out loud, they get sharper again. So I kept my head down and worked and raised my kids and drove my roots and showed up for my mom, and I let Kenny float around the edges being helpful. I didn't understand what that meant yet. My dispatcher, Cheryl Ruiz, is the kind of friend you don't earn by being charming. You earn her by being consistent. 12 years of early mornings, last-minute schedule changes, and broken-down vans on the side of the road. She knows my voice when I call. She can tell if I'm sick by how I say morning. That week, I called her once, just once, and asked for a schedule adjustment. I didn't explain. I didn't dramatize. I just said I needed to be at my mom's in the mornings for a bit. Cheryl said yes in under 5 seconds. She rerouted my schedule without asking why. That's what I mean when I say silent hero. Some people don't save you with speeches. They just move one piece of your life so you can breathe. I keep thinking about that. My mom's kitchen has a small window over the sink. She used to stand there and watch birds, and when my kids were small, she'd wash their sticky hands in that sink and hum under her breath, like it was a prayer she didn't need words for. The kitchen smells like old lemon cleaner, and whatever bread she forgot was in the pantry. On a normal visit, I'd come in, set my keys down, and she'd already be making tea. She'd ask if I wanted toast. Then she'd forget she asked and ask again. It wasn't tragic. It was just layered. I handled it the way you handle anything that's slowly changing. You adjust without announcing you're adjusting. That's what I thought I was doing. The morning of the betrayal. It was about 7 a.m. at my mom's. I know because my work body clock is loud and because her kitchen clock runs 5 minutes fast. So I always do the math without thinking. Kenny was already there. He was sitting at my mom's table like it belonged to him, with a folder in front of him and a pen resting on top like a tool. He looked up when I walked in, gave me a small nod, not unfriendly, just settled in. My mom stood by the counter. Her hair was brushed, which meant somebody had helped. She was wearing the sweater I bought her last Christmas, the soft blue one. She looked tired in the eyes. I set my coffee down and didn't sit yet. I just watched. There was a small white envelope near Kenny's elbow with the corner torn open. There was a printed page clipped behind the folder, and I saw my mom's name typed at the top from where I stood. Micro mystery number 1 was that the pen was not one my mom owned. It was one of those nice pens, heavier than it needed to be, like it had an opinion. My mom writes grocery lists with a faded bic and a shaky hand. That pen didn't belong in her house. I didn't say anything. Kenny tapped the folder once with his finger, casual, like a man about to explain the weather. He didn't even look up, not at my mom anyway. He kept his focus on the papers, like her body in the room was just a formality. I remember thinking, this isn't right. But I also remember thinking, don't make a scene. Because men like me, we get trained. Keep it calm. Don't embarrass your family. Don't show anger. Handle it later. So I asked, what's that? Kenny finally looked at me fully and smiled in a way that almost passed for warm. It's just making it official, he said. So we can take care of her. My mom turned her head toward me like she was trying to place my face in a file cabinet. Then she brightened a little, because she knew I belonged to her even if she couldn't find the label. Dale, she said. And then, softly, like she was proud of herself, I saved the crossword. She reached toward the table and slid the paper toward me. Half the boxes were filled in with wrong letters. A few were blank. A few were scribbled out. I touched the edge of it, and my throat tightened. Not dramatically, just enough to make swallowing feel like work. Warmth and cold in the same room. That contrast will do something to you. Kenny's voice stayed level. She's been getting worse, he said. We need power of attorney set up right. It's safer. My mom nodded like a child nods when adults are talking above them. I asked, did you talk to her doctor? Kenny shrugged. No need. It's paperwork. We're handling it. He said we like I'd been included. I looked at my mom. I waited for her eyes to meet mine like they used to. They didn't. She stared at the kettle. I took a breath. Then I said, Mom, do you understand what this is? She glanced at the paper like it was written in a language she once studied but hadn't used in years. She smiled anyway. It's for the house, she said, unsure. Then she added, Kenny said it's good. Kenny's good. That was micro-mystery number 2. She said, for the house, and I didn't know yet whether she meant protecting it, selling it, changing it, or just the word house because it was the biggest thing she could grab onto. Kenny leaned back, still calm, and that's when he said the coldest thing I've ever heard said in a normal tone. She already signed it. You were at work. It was under 10 words, and it took the air out of the room anyway. I felt my face go still, like my muscles forgot what expression to make. Okay, I said. That was it. No speech, no arguing, no fists, nothing that would make a good movie clip. Just, okay. My mom looked relieved, like she thought I had agreed to something. She walked over to me and, like it was any other morning, she took my jacket and folded it over the back of the chair. Then she patted the fabric twice, satisfied. Kenny gathered the papers into the folder and stood up. He moved slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He set the pen in his pocket, nodded again, and walked toward the hallway. The door closed gently. That sound, soft as it was, hit me harder than yelling would have. If you've been in a family long enough, you know, the difference between a door that shuts because someone is angry and a door that shuts because someone believes they've already won. I stared at the sink. That was my first real grief of the day. Not anger, grief, the feeling of being late to your own life. Here's what I want to ask you, honestly, because I still don't know what the right answer is. If you found out someone got your mom to sign something while you were working, would you have stayed calm? Or would you have burned the whole room down with your voice? I stayed calm. And the reason is simple. I've met enough systems to know they don't care how you feel. They care what you can prove. The paperwork was already moving. I sat with my mom. I made her toast. I buttered it the way she likes, thin, because thick butter makes her mouth feel coated. She ate slowly. She asked me 3 times if I was going to work, and I answered the same way each time. Yes, later. I'm here now. Micro-mystery number 3 was the folder Kenny left behind by accident. Not the main one, a thinner one, tucked under a magazine on the counter. I only saw the edge because it had a bright green sticky note on it. My mom doesn't use sticky notes. She uses a calendar with a pen tied to it. I slid it out when she wasn't looking, not because I wanted to be sneaky, but because I needed to know what I was dealing with. Inside was a photocopy of a notary stamp and a page with a witness line. There was a name on it I didn't recognize. That mattered later. I left it where I found it and acted normal. I washed the plate. I rinsed my coffee mug 3 times at her sink before refilling it, because my hands needed something repetitive to do or they would shake. Then I drove my route like nothing happened. That part still makes me feel strange. Like I lived 2 lives in one day. One where I smiled at Mr. Gentry and helped him step down from the van, and one where I watched my mother's life get handled like a file. After my last drop-off, I did go to Peavy's. I sat in my booth. Mel poured coffee. She asked if I wanted pie, and I said no. She didn't push. She just left the check face down like she always does, giving me privacy like it's part of the menu. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures I had of my mom, the older ones. Her holding my kids, her laughing at something off camera. I stared at them until my eyes started to burn. Then I wiped my face with a napkin and paid. No one in that diner knew what I'd just lost. Not yet. That night, I went back to my mom's to make sure she took her pills. Kenny wasn't there. The house was quiet. My mom was in her recliner with the TV on too loud, not watching it. She handed me the crossword without being asked. She couldn't tell me what day it was, but she remembered the crossword. That's the kind of thing dementia does. It steals your map but leaves you a few familiar landmarks. I tucked her in, checked the locks, and drove home. My kids were at their rooms, living their lives, half in their screens, half in the world. I didn't tell them. Not because they wouldn't care, but because they deserved one normal night. Around 11:38 p.m., after everybody was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad. I wrote down everything I remembered. Dates, times, words, the color of the folder, the pen, the notary stamp copy, the name on the witness line. I wrote it like an incident report. Because in my line of work, when something goes wrong, the first thing they ask you is what happened. And if you can't answer clearly, they treat you like you're the problem. So I answered clearly for myself. 1 page became 4 pages. Micro mystery number. 4 was that Kenny had said power of attorney, but the photocopy I saw had language about real property. That's not just medical decisions. That's houses. That's deeds. That's money. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was plotting. Because I was mourning something I didn't know how to name yet. At 6:10 a.m. the next morning, I called one person. Cheryl. I said, I need you to reroute me again. I need a gap mid-morning. She didn't ask why. She just said, I've got you. And then, softer, you okay? I paused. And I told the truth in the smallest way. Not really. She said, do what you need to do. That's it. One short call, no drama. No big plan spoken aloud. Just space created. I didn't call Kenny. I didn't confront him. I didn't send a text asking what he'd done. Because if he was willing to do this at 7 a.m. in my mom's kitchen, he was willing to lie about anything after. Instead, I called an elder law office. I found on a bulletin board at St. Francis Urgent Care months earlier. I'd taken one of my dialysis riders there after a complication, and I remembered the flyer because it had a blue border and the words, Protect your parent in plain font. I kept the flyer in my glove box. I don't throw things away. I keep receipts. I keep appointment cards. I keep old route printouts. Routine. Foresight. Documentation. I set an appointment with Patricia Sue. Her office was quiet. Not fancy. A small waiting room with a water cooler. And a couple of pamphlets that looked like they'd been thumbed 1,000 times. When I sat down, I realized my leg was bouncing. I made it stop. Patricia came out and shook my hand like she meant it. She had a steady face, the kind that tells you she's heard every version of this story and she still takes each one seriously. I told her I wasn't sure what Kenny had my mom sign. I told her my mom had dementia. I told her I'd seen a photocopied notary stamp. I told her Kenny had been opening her mail. Patricia didn't react emotionally. She just started asking questions in a calm, orderly way. Dates, names, whether my mom had ever been formally evaluated, whether there was a prior power of attorney, whether there were other siblings. I answered. I didn't add opinion. I just gave facts. At one point she said, Do you have any proof your mother lacks capacity? I swallowed and said, Not official. Not on paper. She nodded like that was normal, because it is. Then she said, We can get it on paper. That sentence was the first time I felt my shoulders drop in 2 days. Patricia explained something to me that I didn't know. And I'm telling you because if you're listening and you've got a parent slipping, you might need it. Power of attorney can be valid even when things feel wrong, until it's challenged properly. And challenging it doesn't happen by arguing in a kitchen. It happens by filing. She said the words, emergency guardianship petition, like they were a wrench you could grab off a pegboard. Muskogee County District Court. That was the pathway. But she also told me the hard part. Emergency guardianship isn't just a form you print. It's a process. You need medical evidence. You need to show immediate risk. You need to show why you, not someone else, should be guardian. It sounded cold the way she described it. But it also sounded fair, because courts can't run on feelings. They run on what can be verified. I didn't understand how much that would matter until later. I signed Patricia's engagement letter and paid a retainer that made my stomach tighten. I don't have spare money. I drive Medicaid transport. I make a living, not a fortune. But I'd rather eat beans for a year than let my mom become a line item in somebody else's plan. Patricia asked me to start gathering documents, bank statements, medical records, the deed to the house, any existing POA documents, anything with Kenny's name on it. That's where the quiet revenge started. Not with anger, with a folder. At home, I took a cardboard box from the top shelf of my closet and labeled it Loretta. I started putting copies in it. I didn't take originals unless I had to. I made a simple checklist on my legal pad. What I had, what I needed, who to call. Micro Mystery Number 5 was the name I saw on the witness line. I typed it into my phone and found a Facebook profile. A man in Muskogee, mid-30s, worked at a small used car lot. Friends with Kenny. That didn't mean it was illegal, but it meant it wasn't random. And random is what you want when you're witnessing something you're supposed to be impartial about. I kept my routine. I drove my routes. I rinsed my mug 3 times. I made my kids dinner. I helped Wyatt with a math problem he didn't want help with. I asked Emma about her plans after graduation, and she shrugged like teenagers do when they're trying not to show they care. Underneath all that, I collected paper. Patricia sent me for a cognitive evaluation for my mom. Not at St. Francis Urgent Care, but I did end up there for blood work, paperwork, and referrals because that's how healthcare works in real life. You go to one place to get told you need another place, then you go there to get told you need another form. I sat in St. Francis waiting room, holding a clipboard and watching my mom stare at the fish tank like she was listening to it. Kenny showed up halfway through. He walked in calm, holding a bag of peppermints my mom likes. He handed them to her and she smiled, genuinely. He brushed a stray hair off her forehead like a son would. That was his human moment, and it did something confusing to me. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it reminded me why this kind of betrayal works. Because nobody is a cartoon villain. They're a person who can be tender in one moment and calculating in the next. Kenny sat down next to me and said, "You really putting her through all this?" It wasn't anger. It was disappointment, performed. I said, "Doctor asked for it." He nodded slowly like he didn't believe me, then looked at my mom and smiled again. I watched him and thought, he thinks I'm too tired and too broke to fight. He thought wrong. I never told him I'd hired an attorney. I never told him I'd started a paper trail. I let him keep assuming. At night, after everyone was asleep, I sat with my documents. I highlighted dates. I wrote down the exact phrasing Kenny used. I made copies at a local print shop and kept the receipts. Some people might think that's paranoid. It's not. It's how you build something that holds. One night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my wife's old sweater in my hands. I don't wear it. It doesn't fit me. But sometimes I hold it because it still smells faintly like her shampoo. Or maybe my brain just wants it to. I cried quietly once, not sobbing. Just a slow leak. Because if she were here, none of this would be happening. Kenny would not be brave enough. My mom would have her advocate. My kids would have their mom. Grief is strange that way. It stacks. One loss makes room for another. I wiped my face and folded the sweater and put it back. Then I went back to the kitchen table and kept working. Welcome to the Dad Chronicles. Get comfortable and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. Patricia filed the emergency guardianship petition with Muskogee County District Court. She told me it would move fast if the judge saw immediate risk. Immediate risk meant showing that Kenny, as a power of attorney, was making decisions that weren't in my mom's best interest, or that her assets were being put in danger. That's where the micro details started turning into something heavier. My mom's bank had a record of a cashier's check request that she couldn't have made herself. Amount wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. It had a memo line that referenced home repairs, but no contractor. No invoice, no work done. I got the printout, dated, stamped. Patricia nodded when she saw it. This helps. Then we requested the actual power of attorney document Kenny claimed she signed, not his description of it. Not a photocopy. The filed, notarized document. It took time, and time is where most people give up. They get tired. They miss work. They don't want to feel foolish. They decide it's not worth it. But I live in a world of schedules. If you miss a dialysis run, someone suffers. So you don't miss it. I treated this the same way. One step, then the next. Patricia also advised something I didn't expect. She said, "We need to document your mother's daily function. Not just the diagnosis. The reality." So I started keeping a log. It felt clinical. But it wasn't for cruelty. It was for truth. Day 1, forgot the kettle on. Day 2, couldn't find the bathroom in her own house for 2 minutes. Day 3, called Wyatt Dale, and then laughed, then cried, then forgot why. Some of those entries made my hands shake as I wrote them. I didn't show my mom the notebook. I didn't treat her like a case file. I treated her like my mom. I brought her soup. I fixed her porch light. I did the crossword with her, even though she couldn't follow it anymore. I kept my voice gentle, because my fight wasn't with her. Kenny kept acting like nothing was happening. He'd drop by my mom's, bring groceries, take selfies with her and send them to the family group chat like proof of care. He'd joke with my kids when he saw them. He'd slap Wyatt lightly on the shoulder and ask about school. My kids liked him. That made it harder. If you're a dad listening to this, you know what I mean. It's one thing to hate someone who's cruel to everyone. It's another thing to deal with someone who can be kind in certain directions. It splits you. Patricia told me to stay quiet. Let the process work. Don't tip him off. Courts don't like theatrics. They like consistency. So I stayed consistent. Then, 2 weeks in, Patricia called me and said, "We have something." She didn't sound excited. She sounded focused. The notary on the power of attorney document was listed as someone whose commission had expired months earlier. It's not always automatically invalid, but it's a problem. A serious one. A crack in the foundation. Also, the witness name I'd looked up, Kenny's friend, had signed as disinterested party, which is a phrase that means you have no stake in what happens. But the investigator Patricia used found a Venmo, payment from Kenny to that friend 2 days after the signing. It wasn't labeled witness fee, it was labeled thanks, a small payment. But it was there, and that meant it wasn't clean. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel joy. I felt tired, because even when you find proof, you still have to carry it. Patricia scheduled the hearing. Emergency guardianship moves fast, but fast still involves calendars, notices, service, and a judge's availability. And then came the part I teased at the beginning. The certified letter. Patricia told me, "He will be served, officially." She said it like she was telling me the sun would rise. It wasn't personal. It was procedure. But to me, it felt like the first real shift in gravity. The next step wasn't emotional. It was scheduled. The next morning, I got a voicemail confirming a courthouse call set for 9:00 a.m. On the day Kenny got served, I wasn't there. That was on purpose. Patricia told me not to be. Let it arrive like weather, not like a fight. I spent that morning driving my dialysis route like normal. I picked up Ms. Harlan, who always counted her steps to the van under her breath. I adjusted the seatbelt so it didn't press on her port. I listened to the soft sound of the heater. My phone stayed in my pocket. At 9:03 a.m., it vibrated. It was Patricia. She said, "He's been served. Hearing is set." I said, "Okay." She said, "Be prepared. He may call you." He did. Kenny called while I was parked outside St. Francis Urgent Care, waiting for a rider. I watched my steering wheel as the phone rang. I let it ring twice before I answered because I needed my voice to be steady. "Dale," he said. Calm, but thinner now. "What is this?" I didn't explain. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I said, "Talk to your lawyer." There was a pause. Then he said, "You're doing this to family." I waited. I could hear him breathing. I said, "Talk to your lawyer." and I ended the call. My hands didn't shake. Not because I'm strong, because I'd practiced calm for years. Driving sick people teaches you how to keep your tone level even when someone's life is folding in half behind you. The hearing wasn't in a big dramatic courtroom scene like you see on TV. It was a process. People sitting, papers stacked, the court clerk doing their job, the judge asking questions like they were reading from a checklist. Because in a way they were. Kenny showed up with an attorney. He looked clean. He looked tired around the eyes for the first time. He nodded at me once, like we were still part of the same team and this was a misunderstanding. Patricia didn't nod back. She didn't glare either. She just opened her folder and laid out our documentation in the order she'd prepared. Kenny's attorney argued that Kenny had been acting in my mom's best interest, that I was busy with work, that I was emotional, that I was overreacting. Patricia responded with facts, medical evaluation results, capacity concerns, the expired notary commission, the payment to the witness, the bank cashier's check request. The judge listened. I answered questions when asked. Short sentences, dates, times. I didn't insult Kenny. I didn't paint him as evil. I just told the truth. The moment Kenny realized what was happening didn't come from me. It came from the judge. The judge said something like, "Given the irregularities, the court is suspending Mr. Fitch's authority pending further review." Kenny's head moved just slightly, like he'd been tapped. His attorney leaned in and whispered. Kenny's face went blank. That's when Patricia slid one more document forward. The emergency guardianship. Petition wasn't just to pause Kenny. It was to appoint me, temporarily, as guardian, with immediate authority to manage my mom's medical decisions and protect her assets. And because it was emergency, it took effect right then. Irreversible consequence. Kenny was removed as power of attorney. No yelling. No triumphant speech. Just a legal shift, clean and final, like a light switch. I watched Kenny's mouth open slightly, then close. He looked at my mom, who was not in the courtroom because it would have confused her and hurt her. For a moment I saw something human in Kenny's eyes. Regret, maybe. Or fear. Or just the sudden realization that paperwork has weight. He looked at me and I didn't smile. I didn't scowl either. I just looked back. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it. But it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it and drop your thoughts in the comments. After it was done, Kenny stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, not blocking me, not chasing me, just standing like a man waiting for a bus that wasn't coming. He said quietly, "I was trying to help." Patricia was beside me, her hand on her folder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. I said, "Maybe you were. But you did it wrong." Kenny swallowed. His eyes flicked down for a second, then back up. He said, "She'll hate you for this." I didn't answer that. Because my mom wasn't going to hate anyone. She was going to forget the shape of this fight. And that was both a mercy and a tragedy. I walked past him. Not fast, not slow. The door closed gently behind me when I left the building. Outside, the air was cold enough to make my lungs tighten. Late February doing what it does. In the following days, the work wasn't over. Guardianship means responsibility. It means I had to open a separate account for my mom's funds. It means I had to notify her bank. It means I had to file an inventory with the court. I had to document every expense like I was spending someone else's money, because I was. Patricia guided me through it like a map. I updated my mom's medical proxies. I arranged for in-home help 2 afternoons a week, because I'm one person and I'm not proud enough to pretend I can do it all. I locked down her mail with a new mailbox key. I put a small camera on the front porch, not to spy, but to know who came and went. Kenny didn't show up anymore. He still texted my kids sometimes. Funny memes, baseball updates, little check-ins. They answered. I didn't tell them not to. Because here's the thing, you can hold someone accountable and still acknowledge the parts of them that were real. But you can't let the real parts distract you from the harm. So I stayed steady. One more thing happened that I want to tell you because it's the part that still chills me. Patricia obtained a copy of the document my mom had signed, the full one. It wasn't just power of attorney. It included language that would have allowed Kenny to transfer the house into a trust he controlled under the excuse of asset protection. It was wrapped in helpful words. It was dressed up like care. If it had gone through fully, if he'd gotten the deed moved, unwinding it later would have been a nightmare. That was the payoff of the open loop. The certified letter, the filing, the signature that mattered wasn't my mom's. It was the judge's order, granting emergency guardianship. That signature put the brakes on everything. And it happened because I stayed calm and built a case instead of an argument. I wonder how many families don't catch it in time. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to protect a parent from someone. Helpful. I'm not asking for drama. I'm asking because people don't talk about this enough, and it thrives in silence. A month later, I took my mom to Peavy's family diner on a Friday morning, a day she used to like because it felt like a treat. I sat her in the booth. Mel brought her decaf and called her Han, like she always has. My mom smiled and said, "My son drives people." Mel said, "He sure does." My mom looked at me like she was seeing me through a clean window for a second. She reached into her purse and pulled out the crossword. She'd saved it again. It was wrinkled and half done. I finished it for her while she watched the cars go by outside. And in that moment, I didn't feel victorious. I felt responsible. That's the truth. Now, here's the ending. Not the legal ending. The real one. A few days after the court, I pulled into my mom's driveway early. The sun was just coming up. There was thin morning ice melting off the windshield, sliding down in clear lines like the glass was finally letting go of the night. I left the engine idling. I didn't go inside right away. I sat there in my truck, hands on the wheel, listening to the quiet tick of the heater. My phone buzzed. It was Cheryl. I answered, and she said, "You good?" I looked at my mom's front window. The curtains were still drawn. The house looked small and safe. I said, "Yeah, I'm here." Cheryl paused, then said, "Okay, see you tomorrow." "See you," I said. And that was it. No celebration. No victory talk. Just one loyal call, a small anchor. I sat a little longer and watched the ice melt. Settled. That's the word. Not happy. Not proud. Settled. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like settled. Like something that should have ended differently. From the very beginning. I finally shut the truck off, took a breath, and went inside to make my mom toast. Loyalty isn't loud. Legacy isn't built in speeches. It's built in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. I will see you on the next one.